New Babylon is a 1929 Soviet silent film about the Paris Commune of 1871. Well, the Commune was the result, really, of Louis Napoleon's Second Empire crashing and Bismarck's Prussia invading France. And in the kind of power vacuum that was created after the French defeat, the citizens of Paris rose up and declared themselves a republic. And of course the French government was having none of that and encircled the insurgents and put down this insurrection with extraordinary savagery. 30,000 communards are said to have been executed. The Commune for Russia was one of those beacons that all true revolutionaries looked to. It only lasted a matter of months. It happened very fast. The Parisians barricaded the streets, they abolished all sorts of laws and regulations, and they created what many people have seen as the first workers' commune. New Babylon was conceived at a moment when the early Soviet filmmakers were starting to feel the impact of Stalin's growing paranoia and his desire for complete control, especially of a popular medium like cinema. The Commune, of course, was one of the official forerunners of the Bolshevik Revolution. It had been hailed by Karl Marx. So any detailed account would probably have fallen foul of Stalin, especially its fundamentally democratic nature, with all the leaders of the Commune elected. It's not fundamentally inaccurate, but it's stressing the romantic appeal of the Commune through the figure of the heroine, the shop girl who becomes a convinced revolutionary. Here in 1929, it's a moment when Soviet filmmakers were still creatively inspired by the idea of revolution. They used these elements to make a rare historical film that combines true pathos with a very real sense of the Second Empire in crisis. Kozintsev and Trauberg were two young men who arrived in St. Petersburg just after the revolution. Their first thought was to make theatre. So they formed a group, the Factory of the Eccentric Actor, FEX for short. Trauberg told me the story of how they printed a manifesto on sugar paper and drove around St. Petersburg, tossing it out of the back of a lorry. It is a futurist manifesto. It says, "Down with art, we prefer Charlie Chaplin." It damns everything to do with high culture. And really what's important about it is that the FEX group were nailing their colours to the mast. They were saying, we are not interested in creating pompous, celebratory art. We want to do something which is in the spirit of popular art. So they looked abroad, especially to American comedy, as their model. Revolutionary politics was actually very important to Trauberg and Eisenstein's generation. As part of their preparation for making the New Babylon, they read Karl Marx. Marx wrote two very famous essays on the Commune, and some of the images in the film come directly from Marx, when he talks about a spectral Paris, a Paris that is almost like a dream Paris. They translated those into film. Shostakovich was even younger than Kozintsev and Trauberg, and they had the idea that here was a man in their own spirit, a man who could be relied upon not to produce boring, predictable music, but who would actually do something that would shake up the world of film music. Shostakovich was a big admirer of Offenbach and of Paris Belle Époque operetta, so he was very much in sympathy with what they were doing. Why should a film about the Paris Commune be called the New Babylon? It's named after the department store, which is the central scene of the action, at least in the early part of the film. This is a sort of synthesis of all the great department stores. This is supposed to be a place where consumers, the new consumers, are seduced by the magnificence of the displays. And the central figure of the film is a shopgirl who works in the New Babylon, a member of the oppressed proletariat, who will emerge through the Commune and become a heroine. The personal story, as opposed to the background of the Commune itself, is of a kind of romance across the barricades, a tentative romance between the shopgirl, played by Kuzmina, and a young soldier who is part of the army that's sent in by the Versailles government to quell the Commune. He's not happy about the role that he's required to undertake, and she realizes that she probably shouldn't be attracted to him, but she is. So it's a classic story, if you like, of an improbable and unsuitable romance, which is there, I think, to humanize the story, because for Kosnetsev and Trauberg it was important that they weren't just making an historical epic. The events of the Commune were epic enough, but they wanted to make it more personal. They wanted to show the kind of conflicts. What if, you were fighting your own family, as many people were? What if you were defending your own street against fellow countrymen who were attacking your street? What if your source of income, your livelihood, working in a big department store, was going up in flames? It was a very, very different kind of revolution from one that's happening on a sort of epic scale. But what Kosnetsev and Trauberg did was to create this sort of synthesis of the Paris that we imagine, the Belle Epoque Paris. It's a very, very unusual setting for a story of revolution. Kosnetsev and Trauberg were very conscious of what we would call gender issues today. The New Babylon has a woman at its center. She represents the spirit of revolution. The images of her on the barricades, a shop girl who's turned into a fiery militant, are absolutely fantastic. I mean, they really speak to us today, I think. They did something which, in fact, Soviet revolutionary propaganda was not very good at doing at all, which was revealing the role of women and giving women a prominent place in it, because they had a prominent place, but that was largely being brushed aside by the end of the 20s. I think the great thing about the film, from a scripting point of view, is that it reverses our normal expectations. Our normal expectations are that the revolutionary hero will be a male, and he may well have a woman who follows him and perhaps becomes convinced by his zeal. This is the other way around. The attraction between her and the soldier leaves him as the man who realizes that he has not made the right choices, and he's not actually up to jumping ship and becoming a true revolutionary like her. The tragic irony, of course, is that Jean ends up alive and part of the very force that has destroyed the Commune and destroyed the woman he's in love with, and ends up digging her grave. This, of course, is historically entirely plausible, and yet it's a moment of immense pathos. I think it really does make the film a true revolutionary melodrama in the good sense of the word. When we revived the film with its score in the early 1980s, really it was shown for the first time reunited with the Shostakovich music, people were very struck by how contemporary it felt. People responded to the film as if it was not a distant, silent film from the Soviet 20s, but an absolutely contemporary film. People were making parallels with contemporary revolutionary movements of the 1970s and 80s. It's got some interesting ironies to it. First of all, while the actual Commune itself was taking place, the rest of Paris was going about its business, just like it had done. The cabarets were functioning, the nightclubs, etc. There was just this one area that was barricaded, where people were facing a life and death struggle. So they decided to use that, and we have a strong sense in the film of an audience which is an audience of contemporary Parisians who are not part of the Commune, watching what's going on. And there's an extraordinary moment in it where the bourgeoisie have turned out on a hillside to watch the bombardment of the communards. I suppose we could call it Brechtian. It's a kind of distanciation. It's not just we are there in the midst of these stirring events. We're actually understanding that the stirring events of the Paris Commune were being viewed by an audience that was hoping very much for its defeat. And so it really is getting right into the heart of the matter, which is that this was an insurrection in the middle of the most sophisticated city in Europe, which threatened to unleash the same energies that had originally been unleashed in 1789, the original French Revolution. It was almost like a rerun, and that's why, of course, the authorities were so terrified. As far as we can tell, the film led to a lot of disagreement. There were extreme partisans who said it's the best thing that the FX group have done yet. There were others who were very hostile to it and said it was disrespectful, it was not the way to treat the martyrs of the Commune, people who really didn't like the kind of liberties it took. The fact that it really does show us the decadence of Paris life with great relish. We see sort of Daumier-like characters, you know, slumped over cafe tables. This clearly offended a lot of people. They felt it was not how we should be showing, you know, a great monument to revolution.
They said, oh, that is formalism, that is abracadabra, that is not good realistic cinema.
So I think there was a lot of debate. And when I talked to Trauberg about this in the 80s, he looked at me and said, you know, having disagreement is a very good thing for a film.
I think that it is better than one opinion about film. When the people divided and the enemies and the friends, and they was in battle, that is better for us.
There's nothing better than having people who really like it and people who really hate it. So I think we can assume that it was very controversial. Meeting Trauberg was one of the great experiences of my life, because this was a man who was very elderly by the time I met him, but he still had the kind of impishness of youth. To talk to him was to be transported back to what it must have been like back in the 1920s, when these great figures of revolutionary filmmaking were just youngsters. And they were trying to be disrespectful. They were trying to break the rules. After 1929, the film was largely forgotten. It suffered the fate of a lot of late silent films. The music was never recorded, of course. It was played live at the time, not very well played, because it was very difficult music for a cinema orchestra. The score and the film became separated. And I would say that between about 1930 and really the end of the 70s, the film was largely forgotten. I think the film had a tremendous impact in the early 1980s. Young people actually flocked to see it. I think it reawakened our sense of just how exciting Soviet revolutionary art could be. It's so different that it still has the power, I think, to inspire. It brought that distant first dawn of revolution into our world. I mean, I would say it's a very political film through and through. Political in its image making, political in its music. It's really making us think about what an urban revolution like the Commune means.